Can y'all see me? Wait a minute. Let me focus. There I am. Yes, come on, focus. Yes, come on, light. Why you should not judge yourself too harshly. I think it's inevitable. I believe it's inevitable for a lot of artists and creatives to be pretty harsh on what it is that they create, how they create it, how fast they need to create it, and what level they consider themselves to be good enough for, or where they see themselves at. That can be quite, the mind F, if you know what I mean. But here's the thing. When I started out my journey, I did not know how good I was, or actually how bad I was, before actually starting. And as I started, I just allowed myself to be in this space where I would grow. I knew that as a painter, my level would nowhere be near something that I would foresee for myself. So I already was in the mind space of whatever it is that I'm creating right now, it is nowhere going to be something like that. That one. Nowhere. However, here is the beauty of being an artist, which sometimes can also be like a curse. Even though you're in a learning phase, you're always growing, you're always progressing, hopefully. So what can happen is that you start to put these metrics. And there's actually nothing wrong with putting up metrics. There's nothing wrong with using measurements that tell you where you are in your own artistic journey. But you do have to have this objective view to it. It's not subjective. It doesn't say anything about you personally. And that is a telltale sign that you need to step a little bit back. There are a number of metrics that you can use at any time, at any moment. One metric that I like to use and look at is my personal growth. My personal growth in life will have an influence on what it is that I produce and how I will produce it. It can also make me create a lot of complex, more in-depth type of work. It really challenges my mind to put the picture, put the story or the experience that I see in myself or in others on canvas. I do tend to look for the complexity of stories and how stories build up. And that's also a way that I have grown in my work, going from just wanting to paint a pretty picture to painting something that really tells a story and having to use elements and people, objects, subjects that help me in that. A second element or metric that you can use is technique. Now, the way that I painted 5 years ago is nowhere near the way that I'm painting right now, like the painting here behind. And I can guarantee you 5 years from now, I'm going to even be painting a lot differently. I don't know if it's going to be better or if it's just going to be differently. I know it's not going to be worse. I might be looking for specific details. I might want to study the anatomy of bodies more. I want to maybe study more how I use color. I want to study more. I'm an autodidact. So that means that I am self-taught. So through trial and error, I started to learn how I use lamps and colors and the composition of the body and also the placement of subjects and objects and also how it can be appealing to the eye. I use a lot of bright colors. I like to paint the dark skin because the dark skin has a lot of beautiful, warm, but also sometimes cool nuances. Those examples that I've just mentioned are always that I grow in my technique and I learn more in my technique and also allow myself to understand my workflow and see what it is that I need to work on. That is of course subjective, because I might think that I'm be doing everything handy dandy and fine, but when I'm in a group expo and I see somebody else, or maybe a curator's looking at my work and they give me some, tips, some pointers, there could be a possibility for me to grow in my technique as well. Exploring the art world, exploring your network, or actually expanding your network if that is necessary. When I started out, I didn't have a network. When I started out, I did not have a network of visual artists. So people that were also painting, illustrating, or drawing. At least not that I was aware of. Not people that were interested in doing it professionally and really were putting their time and their effort into it to make that their career, or they already started that as their career. So I didn't have people in that particular area. I do have people that are more performative in their art, so that are more dancers, performers, and people like that, but not people that would do visual art. Also in my family, there are no visual artists. There are not a lot of creative people. And not to say that my family is not creative, but what it means is there are not many, just very few people that might express themselves creatively through drawing, illustrating, painting, or whatever it is. Maybe something else through knitting or making fashion, creating fashion, things like that. But not necessarily the thing that I was looking for. That is basically the point. Not the thing that I was looking for. Not the thing that I was looking for. So my network, my artwork was just me. It consisted of me. So I was basically a kid again. And when everybody knows, when a kid grows up and understands that their world is not just evolving about, around them, but it is about the people that are all part of their world, it starts to become a lot bigger. And the more as I put myself out there, because that is a very important part of having a network. You have to put yourself out there. When you put yourself out there, you start to learn your own identity as an artist. And that is, of course, ever developing. Like I already said, it's your personal growth, is your, your technique that you're using and that you want to develop, but it's also your art network or the art world in your case, where you are expanding, learning, and trading with. So looking at the first three factors, the points, right? The vital points that I've just mentioned. Now, why are these three, before I continue, why are these three so important when it comes to not judging yourself too hard? Because those are the smallest. Your technique might not be at its highest peak when you're starting out. Even if you're coming from college, even if you're studying with the great masters, you're not at your peak. You still have so many X amount of time, right, to do what it is that you need to do. So wherever you are right now, don't judge yourself too harshly. Also, when it comes to personal growth, you're a person. You live with others, but also you have your own space where you get to develop and where you get to, just process a lot of things that are happening in your life, or maybe the things that are not happening in your life. So that also has an influence on how you perceive yourself as an artist and how you want to put that on canvas or whatever piece of material that you're using. So that is also something that you cannot judge yourself too harshly on. If you are 18 years old and you say to yourself, I want to be an artist, bet you're not going to be the same artist when you are 28, and you're definitely not going to be the same artist when you're 38. I can guarantee you that. You grow in the meantime, and you have to allow yourself to grow. When you do not know a lot of people like yourself, you can't judge yourself for not knowing all these people. You can't judge yourself for not knowing those people. What you can is take action to get into the network, get into the art world. You have to put yourself out there. Like I already said, you got to put yourself out there. Not everybody might be open to you. Not everybody wants to hear what it is you have to say. You might be a newbie, so what is it that you have to say? You might not be represented by a gallery, and you might not have the portfolio of X amount of paintings or work. So don't judge yourself too harshly on those points. You are still developing. You are still growing. Let's go to the last two. So the fourth factor is materials. Now, it is not something that you would think me saying in this particular video. Like materials? What do you mean? With materials, I mean that what you work with, it changes. It's not going to be the same. In the beginning, I did more drawing, sketching, illustrating. That became, in comparison to painting, a lot less. It's now more painting. When I started painting, I started to work with study material, and it was predominantly acrylic because it was cheaper and allowed me to work with just with the notion of being a painter, because I wanted to paint for so long. But the very first question that I had in my own process is, how do I start? Holding the brush, working with the material, working on canvas, and just expanding myself more and more to, you know, better material and more professional material, and also understanding the material. What is it that I need? What is it that I don't really need? Why did you buy that anyway? That thing is expensive. It's expensive, and it's just collecting dust. When you take that into account, is a very important factor. You can substitute this for anything. If you're a photographer, you start with the first camera that you have. You're not going to buy the most expensive camera that's out there. But you do know that the more you get into your work, the more you are going to analyze the requirements that your camera needs to have. The more you're going to analyze what it is that you need to have when it comes to the materials and how you're using the materials. You're going to be very critical of it. You're going to be very specialized and have a certain expertise and knowledge over the things that you're using. So give yourself time. It can change. It can absolutely change. The fifth one is developing an art practice. In the beginning, when I said, okay, now I want to go to be a professional artist, I really wanted to grow into that. And I started to read and examine what it is that it entails being a professional artist, what it all entails. I read a lot about having an art practice and what it actually is and how it can benefit an artist to, I would say, create their own little space and world where they get to do the things that they want to do. When an artist talks about his or her art practice, they're basically talking about their field of analyzing the art that they are producing. That is basically it. It's their own world. It's their own little field where they are expert. They are an expert on the thing that they create, and nobody else creates it like them. So, for instance, there are a lot of people that can do hyper-realistic paintings, but each and every painter will have their own subject that is at the center of their practice, their art practice. There are millions of photographers that make nature photos, but each photographer will have their own aim, their own goal, their own centerpiece when it comes to the art that they are producing. So in my art practice, I focus on people from the African diaspora that are living in the Western world, and I tell their stories. I portray their emotions as they are living here, basically as black people in a Western world, or basically the white world. How do you maneuver in that? What subjects really rise to the surface? What is important for people to know? What is being minimized, or what is being exposed or being enlarged? All of those things are part of my art practice, and I focus predominantly on women, but now I also have included men. So my art practice is constantly changing. It's a living entity. It's not just this fixed subject and there is where I put everything in. No, it's a very living entity. Another really great example is Picasso. What Picasso made in the beginning of his career is totally different with what he made later on in his career. Okay, so what is the conclusion that we can get from this? There is nothing wrong with having a metric system. The downside of having a metric system, if you're not using it in the right way, the downside of a metric system is when you take it personally. It's quite hard to be as objective as you possibly can, which is not that much for a lot of people. And especially, you know, if you're not this stone cold hard machine that just looks at things analytically. You are a person, so emotion will be part of that. So subjectively, we do tend to take those metric systems personally. Yet I still would say, do not let it come to a point where you are personally putting yourself down. You are way too harsh on yourself. You are then being way too harsh on yourself. You have to allow yourself some grace. Now, before you leave, please subscribe to this channel. Please like this video and comment if there's something that you would like to know. Maybe there's something that you'd like to share. I would be happy to read it all. Also, after subscribing and liking, click the notification bell, because then you will get a notification on your phone or on your computer. Okay, but that's it. I'm not going to say goodbye, and I will see you next week. Have a good one, y'all.